Microphone test check. Yeah, okay. It's Gale. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for visiting with all of our vendors. They really appreciate your attendance and your discussions with us. They do support primarily the bulk of this meeting, which is very nice to our vendors, and that makes these meetings important. Thank you very much. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Yolanda Garcia. I've been on the board of it's not too long to count. I am the current task president of the organization, and I happen to get the opportunity to introduce our next speaker. So Gale Suwe has been in
You can do it.
I'll do a.
I met her when she and I started teaching the SBB program when it moved from UIC to Rush. And now currently she is the clinical operations director for Loyola Medical Center, and she'll be talking to us about cybersecurity.
You want this? I'll use this one. Okay. Thanks, Yolanda. Can you guys hear me okay? You hear me okay? Before I start, I just want to recognize somebody in the room. Every year, Loyola University hands out awards for preceptor of the year, and we have one in the room. Lavinia Saraceno, can you stand up? She got her award yesterday for mentoring and teaching our MLS students for decades. So thank you, Lavinia. Also, as we go through, I know it's going to sound like I have imposter syndrome, but I don't want to purport myself as an expert on cybersecurity awareness. I had submitted an abstract for the fall Phyllis Unger meeting just to share the things that we're doing to prepare our process. And so then Dr. Carl said he wanted me in the spring. So I didn't envision I could talk about this for 50 minutes. And I know Dr. Barreto is going to have a lot more valuable information, but I just want to share with you what we're doing at Loyola. So our objectives are up there. We want to distinguish between an application downtime and a complete loss of service, identify tools and resources useful to prepare for cyber attack, strategies for collaborating with your external partners. Your vendors are going to be super helpful as you sort of prepare for this, and then recognizing that cyber safety is patient safety. So we all know the stories about the cyber attacks. Our friend Lurie's were hit most recently. Change Healthcare affected everybody. And so it's been blood centers, hospitals, third-party vendors with healthcare. Healthcare is a huge topic. Hospitals may not be the number one topic, target, sorry. Hospitals may not be the number one target, but healthcare is. And you might want to ask, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. But so why do we want to think about cyber attack? Some of it is for operational continuity. we're used to preparing for downtimes. All of us have a downtime binder right now sitting in our blood bank, and we're used to these normal downtimes. Oh, my blood bank LIS is gonna be down for a couple hours, they're doing maintenance. Oh, Epic is gonna be down, they're doing an upgrade. So recently, we had an unexpected, not a complete downtime, but Epic, SunQuest, and everything on our server went down because the room where one of the servers was overheated and the server shut itself down. So as a result, we had no tube system, no phones. So that was similar to what we would expect in a complete downtime. But one of the reasons we want to be vigilant about it is for operational continuity, but also America's Blood Center. They have a document from this year, from April. They are calling an urgent need for action for blood banks, blood centers, hospitals to really be vigilant and prepare to modernize their information technology infrastructure. One of the reasons we're targets is because hospitals kind of lag behind a lot of other places in terms of structure of your cyber system. We all have those authenticators, but you have to look beyond that. How safe is your system? How non-hackable is your system? We want to look at implementing robust cybersecurity measures, enhance our staff training and awareness, which really is one key point as you're preparing for this, and then develop a comprehensive incident response. Again, we're used to preparing for disasters. We in the level 1s, level 2s, all of our hospitals have a downtime binder. We're doing a lot of thinking recently about mass casualty after we had the DNC here last year, but we kind of have to think a little bit beyond that. So I want to start with a few definitions. What is a cyber attack? And you can read it up here. It's an intentional effort to steal, expose, or destroy data on your system through a network computer or a digital device. I'll talk about that in a second. This is an IBM definition. You can find any number of definitions for cyber attack. And then there's different kinds. There's a denial of service, and that's where someone bombards your website with requests for information. And so it shuts it down because it cannot handle the bandwidth of all of these people accessing your website. There's phishing, which really is the #1 way that hackers get into your system these days, is through these phishing emails. And I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But that's, I think we all know, most of us know what phishing is. That's an attempt to grab sensitive information. We all get those emails from Citibank. Hey, click here, put your account number here. You know, your account is on hold. Your Amazon account, you know, is frozen. You can't get your movies, whatever. We all get those and we know how to respond to those. There's also something called man in the middle. Somebody accesses your network and they're just monitoring all of this communication that's going on. They may or may not install malware. They may do it as a way to, again, get sensitive information. There's a Trojan horse, which is a backdoor to your system where someone can enter as a user. And again, they can either take information, they can observe what you're doing, or they can introduce malware that way. And malware is a software that changes or destroys something in your system to prevent the true functionality. In terms of ransomware, this is what we're seeing in a lot of these attacks. That was what OneBlood experience was, ransomware. And that's where someone hijacks your data and tries to sell it back to you for money. So just a quick description of phishing to ransomware. So hacker sends an email to your account, someone clicks on it, and you have thousands of employees, someone clicks on that email that says, hey, click here to access this document. Funny story, it was last year or something, I was sharing a document with someone at another Trinity Health site. They sent it from their personal email, so it had that flag that said external, and I reported her for phishing. She wanted to share a document with me. I'm like, oh, this is phishing. No, it turned out it was that direct to another site. But she's like, that email. So the email comes, someone said, oh, this is great. I want something from a Nigerian prince. They click on it, and once they click on it, it steals your information. And then the hacker can insert malware, and the ransomware spreads through the system. So one thing about ransomware is someone could be spreading it for months without you being aware. They're hitting application after application after application, but initially doing no damage. And some of the reasons they do that are either to get entirely through your network, or in some cases, the hackers who enter and gain access will in turn sell that access to somebody else. When they really activate the ransomware, it blocks your access and they literally hold all of your information hostage. And that's when you get the call, hey, you send me $5 million, I'm gonna send you the encryption so you can get your information back. Some hospitals have chosen to pay the fee for the hijack for the ransomware, some have not. In the case of, I think it was University of Virginia, when they were hacked, they chose not to pay. 5 days later, the hackers started contacting patients. Hey, if you send me $5K, I won't release your information on the dark web. So there's just a lot to consider when that happens. So that's the terrible story of ransomware. So why are we vulnerable? Well, personal, medical, and financial data are really valuable to a lot of hackers. Since COVID, we've had an increase in telehealth services and wireless devices, a lot of smart medicine. So you want to remember every device you have connected to your network that is a smart thing can be hacked. People have been hacked through infusion pumps, through handheld phlebotomy devices. Anything can have a virus, some sort of attack to it. If someone gets access to, let's say, my email, I have access to a lot of platforms at Trinity Health. They can go in and get into those other ways. They can go in through my laptop. They can go in through, you know, if I'm accessing middleware in my lab, there's a lot of ways to get in. You know, we're all increasing technology for both a competitive advantage and an attempt to treat our patients who are more marginalized or have more difficulty accessing healthcare. Like I know Advocate has it, Loyola has a My Loyola app, Advocate has the LiveWell app. So those apps also can make you vulnerable if a hacker gets your patient's information, gets access to that app, they may be able to get in that way. So just something to think about there. We also have a lot of digitizing and cloud-based systems. You know, we all moved to Microsoft Office 365. So again, it increases our vulnerability. One of the critical things is that there's a lot of inadequate understanding of cybersecurity, especially phishing, which I'll go through on my next slide. So we really want to make sure we're educating our staff and testing our staff periodically on do they understand what a phishing looks like, what are the risks, how do they protect themselves? And then hospitals also rely on third parties. Against Change Healthcare, which was processing payments, crippled almost every hospital in the country that was using it. For Trinity Health, we couldn't bring up reimbursements for like 3 months, which is really impactful. Did I get paid? Yeah, I got paid, but I gotta say, I was a little worried that I wasn't gonna happen. So the most important thing is I got paid, so you can all rest it easy. So just not to belabor the point, so you want to protect against phishing. So we see these things all the time. We actually have digital computer training that all of our staff have to go through twice a year on phishing. Also, our system sends out deliberate phishing emails about once every quarter to see if you recognize. But you can tell the return email address might look a little crazy. Usually it's something that seems really, you know, now the last phishing email I got, I almost didn't recognize a phishing because it looked like it came from human resources. It really was legitimate, it had a Trinity Health logo, it was really well done. The thing that was the alert for us is we have this cybersecurity warning on all of our outside emails from outside of Trinity Health. And it says, hey, it's just the light is up. Oh. See, Cyberattack. So the fact that it's outside doesn't mean it's bad, but it means you look at it, but then our job is high. This is something I got just the other day. Love ketchup, hate it. Either way, it's a lesson for AI. I don't know. I didn't read the email because I didn't think of ketchup. I have no strong feelings either way. But just something to think about when you're training your staff. We back up, good, okay. So here's a scenario that I'm gonna talk about today. Am I doing something? I don't know, I think maybe it is me, maybe I'm toxic. So,
Well, it started doing it right when I put up the like break slide, so it's
Okay.
probably me, I'm sure.
see, it has imposter syndrome, so it just feels like a cat. I'll just keep going. So just one thing to keep in mind as we talk about this. So, you know, you have an unexpected downtime. So when we had this recent unexpected downtime, the service went down. Everybody at Loyola lost their minds. They thought we were cyber attacked. So even though the phones were working for that particular one, nobody wanted to use the phone because they assumed it was down. They assumed we were cyber attacked. So everybody was running around. Where are my downtime requisitions? Where's this? Where's this? Where's this? So we didn't do as well as we thought we did after all this planning. But the scenario we're preparing for at Trinity is assuming that public utilities are still there, that internet is still there, phone service is still there. Not Trinity Health provided internet, but I have a little hotspot on my phone that would hypothetically still work. So that's what we're looking at. And what we're looking at is within our network, we don't have access to anything that runs off that server. So our phones are internet-based phones, our tube system runs off the server. All of our Microsoft Office, everything runs off that server. We would assume we'd have partial access in some cases. We have some standalone computers that are not hooked up to the server network, they're just by themselves. So you could, if you had a mobile hotspot, you could wirelessly connect to the internet and access some functions. We also have the capability to have a shadow read of our Epic, so which again, we don't have to go through the network for. It takes a snapshot, puts it on this downtime, and we can access it independently. I guess I should just stay back here. So the approach at Trinity Health is if they feel something's been hacked, they're gonna instantly shut down the network and everything that's internet based. So again, no phones, no email, no Teams, so we can't even communicate with each other. The other thing to think about is, I'm gonna kind of skip past this slide real quick, is what is available. Epic's gonna be down, our LIS will be down, we can't access our SOPs because guess what, they're online. So how do I get to it? Phones are down, middleware is down, like, my particular analyzer in blood bank can work as a standalone analyzer, doesn't need a middleware to operate. The middleware is great, and then it has a printer directly Ethernet cable to it. So it'll work in downtime, that's not a problem. So that's one great thing, but in the core lab, where everything is interfaced through middleware, those instruments, while the instrument may physically work, you can't get results because you don't have your QC to process your results. And then tube stations, phones, again, our phones are internet based. Our blood bank does have one red emergency phone. It's one of those princess phones from the 70s, which is great. I can call the ER and I can call Core Lab, but that's about it. Not everybody has those red phones. You know, even the Voiceras that the nurses use, the little communication devices, they all run off the network. So good luck reaching anybody. So we asked ourselves, how do we begin? Like, how do we even start preparing for something that we don't really have a full picture of? Well, we in Blood Bank started with our downtime binder. So the downtime binder says, if, you know, you can't submit results through the LIS, we're gonna hold them. We all know how to issue blood manually, not a problem. But at some point, if you're cyber attacked, so in a normal downtime, I may not issue results to the floor for a couple hours while I'm down. They don't really need the type and screen results. What are they really gonna do with it? All they care about is their blood. They don't care what type the patient is. But, you know, they don't have that Epic support now to do the scanning. They have to know how to do a downtime blood transfusion. However, if we're cyber attacked, you know, one blood was down for, I think, like 45 days, was it? Something like that. So at some point, I'm gonna have to start issuing results to them. So we have to look at how are we gonna do that? That really wasn't in our downtime plan. Our downtime plan was a short-term plan to maintain operations. Other thing in our downtime plan was, well, okay, so if they couldn't give us a blood product release order, they would call us. Well, now there's no phones. So what are we gonna do there? So you have to think sort of beyond your downtime. I also reached out to vendors. I want to say the blood suppliers in this room were enormously helpful. I called both Dorothy and Kathy from Red Cross. We don't use Vitalent, otherwise I would have called them. They would have been equally as helpful. But we reached out to them and said, hey, if we're under a cyber attack, how can you support us? Because if I don't have internet, I can't use Blood Hub. So how am I going to get blood from you? What do I need to do for you? So in the case of our blood suppliers, their systems are really not truly interfaced with our systems. But some of our suppliers, like especially in Core Lab, they're interfaced with the middleware of the Core Lab. So when I reached out to them, I said, well, what do I do in Cyberattack? Their response is, well, first thing is to call us because we're going to sever our connection with you so we don't in turn get infected. The blood suppliers were great. They walked us through how do we notify the blood supplier? How would we continue to order blood? What would that look like for us and how could they support us? So again, I think Allie mentioned it too. I really encourage you to reach out to your vendors. They're going to be great partners, really for any initiative that you're going to do, but especially Cyberattack. You want to walk through, or you want to work with your hospital incident command. I strongly recommend you do this as a hospital. We're doing it as a network. You can do all you want in the blood bank, but if you don't have nursing on board, if you don't have pharmacy on board, the ED on board, it's only going to go so far. You want to walk through your manual processes. So we started planning for this, and then we did a walkthrough. Okay, so we got to order. What is that going to look like? How is it going to look like to issue blood? How is it going to look like to bring in inventory? And a downtime, if I get a shipment from a blood supplier, I'm probably not going to bring it in. I'm going to leave it in the transport cooler or put it in the refrigerator and get to it when I get to it. If I'm down for 45 days, I don't have that luxury. So I don't even have a plan for manually following my inventory from the time it comes in to issuing it to returning it. So that's something we had to create. And then again, you want to evaluate your security risk. One of the things we did was we had a cell phone policy to ask people not to use their cell phones in the lab, which everybody ignores. You walk into Loyola Blood Bank, everybody has their cell phones out. So what we did, I'm not pointing the finger at Lavinia, I'm saying everybody. So, but one thing we did was we thought, okay, if that cell phone is plugged into the PC and the PC gets hacked, your cell phone now is vulnerable. So what I told the staff is, hey, exactly that. Your cell phone is vulnerable if you're charging it off a PC. You want to plug it into the wall in the technical specialist's office to an outlet, that's fine, you'll be safe. And instantly everybody stopped charging their phones at the desk because they're worried about being hacked. Not everybody, but most people. So what we did was we started with this, I think I skipped a one. Yeah, so we started with the planning template. And they call it code of arbitrary. They like these names for these things. So it's just an Excel spreadsheet. I'll kind of walk through these different tabs. But you can see there's tabs here. There's a project plan, there's a timeline, there's context, equipment, a staff template, a parking lot for things we can't figure out. And then on the end is a snapshot of services. And so what we're doing is we're going through for every single process, sort of mapping it out what will happen. So the purpose of this right now is in the planning stages is to identify what do we have to create and with whom do we have to create it, with the goal of really creating a roadmap for if we're hit, we're going to pull this up and say this is not what we're going to do. So the question is, how do you do this if your network is down? Well, you're going to have to sort out on that computer. So whatever you do, whatever your downtime forms are, they may be amazing. If you cannot access your SOPs, it's not going to help. You have to think sort of beyond that. Now, our SOP system is cloud-based. So if we had, like if I brought in my hotspot, I could access from my computer, I could link up to my hotspot if I really wanted to. So I can still access it that way. We could do Blood Hub that way, we could do diversity that way, but we're not embedding that into our plan only because we don't want to say who's going to bring in their personal devices and what's that going to look like. So I'm just going to kind of go through these. So for the project plan tab, and this is like a long spreadsheet, so I have it in parts. We started with, we really like drop-down menus because our LIS team is working with us on this. And so we can sort for everything that's pre-analytic across all labs. Each one of our labs is doing this independently, and then we're coming together once a month to review it. So we started with the testing phase. Is it pre-analytical, analytical, post-analytical? Which patients are impacted? Is it ED, inpatient, outpatient, everybody? Which general work stream? Is it orders, collection, testing, resulting? I don't know, I didn't discuss with you, Dr. Carl, but I was gonna send my my planning template to ILABB. If you want to post it on the website, you can, the Excel file. And you guys can, so if you don't want to take notes or whatever, you'll have it on there, if that's okay.
We can send it as an email to attendees, or I can just put it on the website.
Either way, yeah, it's fine. I don't mind if it's up. I don't really, it's not proprietary as far as I'm concerned. Also to identify the process overview, what are we talking about? And then to identify the task completed. And again, this task is something we have to do now on the moment as part of our planning phase. Then continuing on down the road, we would look at who's responsible, who's accountable to create that task. Is it regional or site specific? What is the priority in terms of having to create it? Like, we have to right away think about how are people going to place downtime orders. It's a huge priority. We have a downtime order form, which I'll talk about in a second. And then moving on, where are we in the process? Is it in process, completed, not started? And then from that first slide I showed you, there were 2 additional tabs, timeline and equipment. So we wanted to ping, do we have to refer to those tabs for more details for this particular task? Moving across still, the next section is which other hospital groups need to be consulted. I can create the world's most amazing downtime specimen request form, but if my nurses don't have it, if they don't have the right version, if they don't know how to find it, it's no good. So we have to ping nursing to review that to make sure it makes sense for that. For incident command, that was for post-analytical, how are we going to get results to people? So one, fun fact is when we had this complete downtime last month, everybody used the downtime forms like champions. Nobody wrote the patient location on them. So we had no idea where these specimens were from, who wanted blood. We had not the first understanding of anything. So what we learned is we've got to do more education on why these things are important for nursing. So then one of the other sheets in our section was a timeline tab. So we wanted to look at what do we need to do right away, and these hours could be adjusted. So for blood bank, obviously we could have no gap in issuing blood or doing stat testing. That has to be immediate, but maybe the routine testing, we can hold off for 4 hours or so before we start routine testing. Because remember, when this happens, you may not initially know what's going on. Maybe an unscheduled downtime, your server got overheated, or it could be you're under cyber attack. You don't know. So maybe we'll wait a little bit before we start doing all the crazy. Then maybe for 24 hours, maybe at 24 hours, if we're still down, we're going to look at what are we going to do with incoming blood inventory. We can't let it sit in the refrigerator forever. At some point, we're going to need it. We've got to do something with it. So that's when we would launch into those procedures for the manual procedures for bringing it in inventory. At 72 hours, we might resume doing titers. Again, it depends on what the titers are for. Are they prenatal? Are they isoagglutinin for organ transplant? But if there's something you can put to the side that maybe is not a stat, you want to think about pushing that back because your staff are really going to be tasked in that moment. Everybody runs around like Curly and the Three Stooges for about the first half hour anyway. So you've got to just focus on what can I do legitimately in the first half hour, and the routine stuff I'll figure out a little bit later. When we're all calm, we can go back to doing titers. And then maybe at a week, I'm going to review staffing for my long term. Everyone's going to be really high energy. They're all going to be committed to this downtime. But after 7 days, it's like, I'm over this now. So what am I going to do in the long term so I don't burn everybody out, including the administrators? Because let's face it, you're going to be tasked with this too. And I'll talk about staffing in a minute. So for the equipment tab in this spreadsheet, we listed each piece of equipment with the vendor. Is it functional in downtime? Like I mentioned, my blood bank analyzer does not need a middleware, doesn't need the internet, has a printer directly Ethernet cable to it. It's gonna work just fine with manual orders and manual resulting, not a problem. But if your analyzer needs it or not, needs middleware might be down, what are you gonna do then? And then if it's functional, what is the capacity? Is it full capacity? Is it partial? Like in Core Lab, we have an automation line. The centrifuges will work. The line won't, because the line won't be able to receive orders. It won't be able to read those barcodes. It won't be able to put them on the analyzers or auto result, but the centrifuges are going to work. And then what is the data retention for patient results? As I'm sure Dr. Barito will tell you, the downtime is bad, the recovery is far worse. So when you're recovering, like we know that our analyzer will keep patient results for 6 months. So we could hypothetically, 6 months or 6 weeks, 6 months. So we could, if we come back up, let's say in a month, we could just retransmit all those results to the system. We'd have to put manual orders in and then retransmit the results. We wouldn't have to be typing it. But like in point of care, the iStats only store 100 patients worth of results. So once you get past those 100 patients, what are you going to do? So that's something, again, your vendor can be really helpful with in helping you figure that out. The other thing we had to look at is the report form CAP compliant? So again, in a short-term downtime, I'm not going to send any manual results to the floors for a typing screen. They don't do anything with it. But if I'm down for 6 weeks, I'm eventually going to have to start sending out results. What does that printout look like? What we found for our analyzer is it was not CAP compliant. All those factors were not on there. Why? Because we're not issuing paper reports directly from the analyzer. Now, we learned from our vendor, you can go in and program it to have all those required CAP elements, and that's something you want to think about. So in downtime, you may want to switch those settings so you're not printing them out all the time, but you also want to make sure, do your staff know how to flip those settings, how to use that printer in downtime? Do they know what to do if you have to change something on your analyzer? And then we wanted to look at, do we have a supply list with power levels? We have it all electronically, but some of the things we don't really bother to keep a power on, like lab coats, because we have a million of them, so we don't worry that much about it. But for your reagents and supplies, you want to know what your normal power level is. You want to have that documented somewhere. So, supply chain is going to have to work on their downtime piece too. So how are you going to be able to give this information to supply chain, keep track of your inventory? So then we have a staff template tab, and it looks like we need more staff than we do. What we did was we figured out what tasks do we have to do in a manual stage. And some of these we also do like in the normal world. So sample triage, is your specimen acceptable? Is labeling okay? Is the requisition okay? We do that every day. So the other thing we did was we looked at what are the qualifications? Normally it's the MLSs who work in our blood bank. In a downtime, they're going to be busy doing immediate spin cross matches, because guess what? Nobody's eligible for electronic cross match because we don't have electronic cross match now. So that's why I'm going to have my MLSs. What I might do, if they shut down outpatient phlebotomy, is grab a phlebotomist and say, hey, I want you to come do my specimen acceptability. So that's why we have the qualification tab, is to look at, are there areas in the hospital that they're not using? Can we grab those staff, bring them in, do sort of a quick training on the fly? So we chose phlebotomists because they're used to looking at labels and specimen acceptability. We thought that was a good fit. But other things like process return products or taking manual temperatures. I really could have anyone take a manual temperature if I want. Again, we have all this automated temperature monitoring, but if the network's down, it's not going to work. So now I have to flex to manual temperatures. But I could have anybody who knows how to read a Celsius thermometer, hopefully, could do that, hypothetically. The other thing we have is a tab for contacts. So we included vendors, blood suppliers. It's people's real information here, so please don't copy down their cell phone numbers. I should have blocked that out. I'm sorry, Kathy and Dorothy, but I didn't. Executive leadership, incident command, and regulatory bodies. So one thing we did at Trinity Health is we have one person who's in charge of all the labs. Everybody sent them their CAP numbers. So if we go into complete Cyberattack, they can notify CAP and say like these 350 CAP numbers are all impacted. And that's something you want to think about, especially if you're in an inspection window, you want to reach out to your accrediting body and say, hey, this is going on. Now, they might still choose to come, but I think they should be aware, like, last year CAP's website went down for a couple of days for proficiency testing. No, I don't think that was Cyberattack, I don't know, but, they were notifying their customers, same thing, I recommend you reach out to your regulatory and accreditation bodies to let them know. Especially if you have proficiency samples due, you may still have to do them, but there may be an opportunity for a conversation. Hey, can I put these off? I don't know, I don't have an answer for you. If you're downtime, you still would be able to do them, but if it's automated testing and your automated testing doesn't work, you can't report it. So I would recommend you let them know, yeah, you can check off that I couldn't do it, but it's gonna seem odd. I'm doing automated testing for 15 years. Now I don't report it, it's a little janky. So I would just let them know. And then this is what we did for our regional labs. So am I okay on time, Dr. Carl?
Yeah, good.
Okay, so for regionally, for the 3 sites, we wanted to make sure we were communicating with each other. And we have a regional lab huddle every day anyway that we have through Teams. Now Teams will not be available, so we signed up for a separate Zoom account that would be totally separate from the Trinity Health Network. And so what we would look at every day is what systems are up? Is Epic up? Is Sunquest or LAS up? Is RALS working for the point of care, et cetera? And then within the labs, what's going on? And this is our standard huddle board for safety, methods, equipment, supplies, staff. And then we added a section for staff surplus. In anatomic pathology, because they have such a lengthy turnaround time for a lot of their tasks, they may, for the first 24 hours, not really have to address anything. So we can leverage some of that staff to help out in the other labs like blood bank or core that might be more impacted. The other thing we developed was what % are we operational for the various labs and the outpatient centers. So the thought at Trinity is that there's a cyber attack, they're going to shut down all the outpatient phlebotomy for at least a couple of days until they figure out what the downtime looks like and then bring some of them back. The clinics may or may not be functional. That decision hasn't been made yet, but even within the lab, are we fully functional? Like, here's my typo, because I thought it was because I procrastinate because I'm poor time management. Now I know I have imposter syndrome, so I have a better excuse, but there's my prenatal with 2 Ps, so good for me. But so like the core lab might shut down A1C testing for at least a couple days. We may stop doing prenatal titers for a couple days. It's just for visibility so everyone knows where we are. The other thing we developed was a regional lab staffing huddle. So we are deciding now, like I said, I would take the midnight shift because I'm up all night anyway, but we want to make sure there's an administrator on site at least the first few days for every shift. Now, if it's 6 weeks, am I going to be there every day on the midnight shift? I don't know. But at least in the short run, we wanted to make sure we divided up our administrators, our leads, our people who are in a position to make a decision for the long term. Once you can get blood bankers get accustomed to anything in about 3 or 4 days. So maybe if this goes on for a month, maybe it's like, I'll go home and sleep and you call me if you need me. So anyone who's heard my ringtone from work will know that it wakes me up. It's a siren. So I'll hear it. The other thing we decided to do was have a daily status of which of our middleware are available. And we would also share this with the hospital because maybe Sunquest will come back up right away. That's our lab LIS. But if the middleware is down for core lab still may not be fully functional. Maybe the middleware for point of care testing is not working. Maybe, Sunquest is up, but the interface, the ADT interface from Epic to Sunquest is still down. So we still can't do anything. So it's just a way to sort of keep visibility on where we are. And then the last part of the tab, which is the general issue tracker. So anytime, you have a big go live, something's going on, you want to keep track of your issues and who's responsible for it. I don't know what this says, but I think my name's on it. Looks like blood bank, Core Lab needed some text and blood bank provided 2 texts. That's a fantasy because blood bank doesn't have any extra text to give to Core Lab, but you can always dream. And it's my job to make sure I find those blood bankers. So I may be coming to you all and maybe not our blood bankers so much. So for final thoughts, again, I recommend you reach out to your vendors, your blood suppliers, and just have that conversation now, see what they can do for you now. Not a blood bank thing, but in the Core Lab, we sent out a lot of specimens to Quest. Quest said they would come in with their own mobile hotspot, their own staff, and they would process those sendouts for us. So that was kind of a nice thing to hear. Again, I recommend you talk to your accreditation and PT providers. You think about standalone computers with printers. And when I say standalone, I mean not on your network, because what will happen is I won't be able to log in with my Trinity Health Network credentials to anything because the network's going to be shut down. So you want to make sure you have a separate computer that doesn't need a login, that has its own hardwired printer or hardwired fax, depending on what you need that for. If you have wireless hotspots, if your hospital wants to invest, which I haven't heard anything about, I want to point out to the loyal people in the room, I've heard nothing about what a wireless, who is going to provide wireless hotspots. Is it going to be me and my Verizon phone? Might could be. Well, so we'll have to see. And again, if you have cloud-based applications for SOPs, for blood ordering, for other things, if you have a standalone computer with a hotspot, you could still hypothetically access your SOPs. And that might be a place, if they're not already in there, to put a lot of your downtime forms and things that you're using is on this standalone computer, you know, either on the hard drive or cloud-based something, so you can access it outside of your network. And then you want to think about sustainability in the long-term downtime. When ILABB had a meeting, I think it was 2019, we had somebody from the Office of Emergency Management from Chicago. And so they were talking about responding just to any disasters. And one thing the speaker said that I thought was really impactful is when you think about sustainability, you have to think about your sustainability. You know, at that time, my son was like 10. So he asked the question, well, could you leave home for 3 days? And your 10-year-old is okay. I mean, my husband's there, but he works too. So you have to think about, many of the people in this room are going to be the go-tos. Can you step away from your home life for a few days? Do you have sort of that infrastructure built in where you can immediately leverage some support there if you're going to be here taking care of this stuff? Just something to think about. And then make sure you're assuring transfusion safety without electronic supports. We all know that, but the things the nurses do in downtime, even now, the 1 hour active downtime, are spectacularly bad. So they don't know how to do downtime transfusion, even though we send the tag on the unit, and we still use paper tags where we are. We haven't gone to Beaker and our new LIS yet, but they could, the paper tag literally says vitals. Who did the verification? You know, what is the start and stop time? They don't know. Like, that's not in any way, shape, or form a clue for that. So you want, and the other thing too is because all of us are so reliant on technology, when it goes down, these nurses don't even want to transfuse because guess what? Epic's not working. They don't have that real-time verification. Now they're afraid. Now you're afraid. I've seen you give the wrong blood with Epic. So, you know, again, not to bash nurses. I have a great respect for nurses, but you know, it's something to think about is, you know, how are you going to make people comfortable? How are you really going to ensure that safety? One of the things I've been talking about with nursing is maybe as an extra step, and they should be doing this anyway, when you receive the blood, maybe, I don't know, look at the label when someone hands it to you and make sure it's for your patient, instead of assuming it's for your patient and just walking down the road to Dr. Carl's room and saying, here's your blood, finds out it doesn't belong to him, it belongs to Ricardo. So maybe just add an extra step for manual verification, just to make everyone a little more comfortable. And then think about what that downtime looks like and how are they going to get it in the chart. So just not to belabor the point, but that's pretty much what I had to say. I want to leave time for questions. There are some resources here from the blood suppliers, Health and Human Services. This last article from CAP is really excellent. It's from a CAP today from I think about a year or so ago. And it was a hospital talking about what they did when they were cyber attacked. And I thought one of the really great ideas they had, they called it, I don't know if they called it a bouncer or I do, but when someone drops off specimens, before they leave, you look at them right there at the window and make sure the labeling is correct, the rec is correct before they go, because you have a runner, everything is gonna have to be manually run back and forth, because our tube system won't work. Yours might, ours doesn't, it's on the network. So as these people are running back and forth, you know, how can you leverage that? The other thing we did, and I know AABB and CAP are here, so I'm gonna ask you to shut your ears for a minute. As we all know, one of the requirements is you have a method to identify the phlebotomist for your samples. So we are not on Beaker yet, so we don't have all the fancy, so we're still handwriting. So presently, we will reject the specimen without a phlebotomist ID. I won't name which medical director, but he's in the room, signed off on a deviation where for other Cyberattack, at least in the short run, we're gonna forego that. If there's a problem, we would call the floor and say, who drew this? And most times they can identify it based on who the patient is, because the nurses we don't have inpatient phlebotomy, the nurses draw their own. So we have a method. It's a terrible method. It's not something I resort to all the time, but it's something where I don't have to keep rejecting blood bank samples during a complete cyber attack. So just, I'm not suggesting that for you. I'm not saying that's what we're gonna do. Nancy and Greg are over there. I'm just saying it's something we talked about.
What?
So don't come during downtime is all I'm gonna say to you. So just something to think about, you know, and we would never take an unlabeled specimen. I'm just saying if there's something you do that's sort of an extra that maybe you think you can sort of modify, now is the time to talk about it with your medical directors. What is a hard stop? What's not going to be a hard stop? Because at some point we have to be survivable. At the last meeting I was on, they said, look, we know we're great all the time. We can't get to great. We have to just get to good. Don't kill anybody. Make sure you're safe, make sure your staff are safe. But beyond that, we've got to do the best that we can. So, just, I didn't put it on the slide, but one other thing, is think about, you know, your payroll system's gonna be down, your badge readers aren't gonna work. You know, if you need that to get in the garage, that's probably not gonna work, so what's that gonna look like? Now, Loyola charges for parking, so my response was, well, if the gate, it's free parking Friday for the next month. I mean, what do I care? But I don't know. So that's really all I have. Thank you.
Questions?
Thanks, Gale, and for sharing your the procedure and your process. My question is, I don't know if I missed it. Did you guys actually test it?
So we're in the process of doing that now. There's still some steps we haven't identified, but like in specimen receiving, for example, we walk through that. We walk through the manual process for tracking blood inventory, which let me tell you, I'm not looking forward to. The other thing I didn't think to put on this slide, but to talk to your LIS group about what does recovery look like? Because one thing we still kind of don't know is how are we going to organize all of this paperwork during the time? And Dr. Barreto may have more perspective on that, but we're thinking we're going to alphabetize it by patient, by day, and kind of go from there. But when you recover, you know, at some point, you have to put in all these orders manually, all these results manually, if you can't re-interface them. So how is your filing system going to support an easy way to do that? Go ahead,
Just a
Colleen.
comment. I heard when the session was down that the younger generation doesn't learn early. So when orders were coming down in person, they were having problems reading them. Something that I never thought I would ever have to think about, but that was something that came up. The other thing we struggle with, our downtime order form, we were told it has to be what's in Epic, the same indications and everything. It's like 10 pages when they print from.
We didn't, yeah.
That's so not practical, and I keep saying that over and over again, that in a huge downtime that's gonna be more than a couple hours. It's not gonna be practical. We have an old one, I kind of almost wanna keep the old one, that's 1 page. Because I just don't see how a 10-page downtime for red cell order is gonna work.
Yeah, we're looking at, so we don't actually have a downtime red cell order form. They use a specimen. It's a whole long story. But McNeil is working on it anyway. What we've been looking at is just maybe 2 or 3 indications and other. And let them fill it in. Yeah, Nancy.
Who said that you had to have a 10-page paper?
I think it was BNP, which is another inspection of universe, but it had to be what was in Epic. It had to match what was in Epic, is what I've been told by the forms people, which I find absolutely atrocious. Because no one is gonna fill out a 10-page form to order one website. Let alone read it. Yeah. And initial on the bottom of every page, it prints with like an initial for the original on every one. I'm like, you got to be serious.
Well, and my view on that was, if you want to inspect me afterwards, and you want to cite me, then cite me. I just won't do it again. I mean, I'm not saying I embrace citation for loyal and medicine, don't misunderstand me, but I'm just saying at some point, this is what I could do. This is what I could do to assure patient safety and assure that people will actually fill out the information that I want, the patient information. And to Colleen's point about handwriting, oh Lord, during that downtime, right, Lavinia? Nobody writes anything anymore. So the writing was just amazingly bad.
Gale, thank you for the presentation. I just have a 2-part question. So is there an accepted criteria or definition for what a short-term or long-term downtime would look like? And would you need 2 different processes for each one of them?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're not differentiating between a short term and a long term. What we did for the tab that I had that said timeline, we tried to look at what we would want to do right away and what we could sort of hold off. So you may not know it's going to be a 14-week downtime at the beginning. So we decided, what do we have to do that was most critical in the short term? What could we put off? But you know, you'll know probably within a few days of what's going on, how long it's gonna be. And so, and again, it's gonna depend. Maybe for whatever reason, Epic is working, it's just everything else is not. So whatever downtime process you create needs to be flexible to a degree where you know, and as you go through, some applications may be brought back up, they find are not impacted. So we didn't distinguish, we just figured we try to flex in the moment of what we need to do.
Thank you.
Do you have a second question or no?
No.
How do you have a question, Dr. Christopher?
Okay, first thing I want to assure everyone is that I'm not an MBA and I know nothing about financing. Okay, but I have sort of a financial question. In institutions which have been hit and they've been offline for a week, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, are you, once you recover and you put all those test results into a patient's medical record, are you getting paid for it?
Yeah, you should be able to bill like you normally would bill.
And even though it's weeks down the road?
Sure. As long as the data service is correct, it should
And
be
you
okay.
did mention one of the send out labs were happy to come in and triage your specimens. Send out labs are a big part of financial business in big institutions. Many of our send out tests are far in excess of $1,000 a piece. Genetic oncology testing is $4,000 for panels. Okay, are we gonna get a big financial hit for our expensive send out tests in this kind of a scenario? And
Well, go ahead, sorry.
we all want to keep our doors open and we all have to make sure we're generating revenues and being paid for our laboratory efforts. Is it a consideration? We need to know what kind of a financial hit we're gonna get if we're victimized by one of these situations.
So yeah, and that's a good point. So testing wise, you should eventually be able to charge because you were down and you have the date of service, you have all the information you need, should be okay. Where you're gonna take the financial hit is in repairing all of this damage. I know there are sites that have cybersecurity insurance, Cyberattack insurance. And I don't remember, was it University of Virginia or Blood? One of them said they had an insurance policy for something like $40 million, but it cost them like $68 million to recover. They had to build a
Let
new
me give you another
service.
example. The point of view of physician Part B billing services, third-party payers, use every effort they can to not pay you. Okay, and so if you're delinquent in a $4,000 test before it gets resulted, there could be an impact, for sure. You're not gonna get paid for your efforts.
Yeah, there could very well, and that's the thing, so that's also a piece missing from us, is what's happening on the clinical side. I was just at a meeting with bone marrow transplant last week, and I said, hey, just throwing this out there, in Cyberattack, our apheresis unit can operate entirely as a standalone unit to collect stem cells, not a problem. However, would you continue to do stem cell transplants if we're Cyberattack? And the physician said, well, sure, why wouldn't I? I said, well, not all the operating rooms are gonna be available, you're not gonna have imaging. Are you gonna be able to store these things? What's your freezer gonna look like? I mean, what is all this gonna look like for you? Are you telling me you're gonna continue to do stem cell transplants? He's adamant that he is. Every surgeon that you talk to is adamant that they will continue at 100% capacity. And the answer is, they cannot absolutely do that, because you're gonna need 5 times the people you need for a manual process, even in the OR. There's no way you're gonna be able to maintain all of those operating rooms. Something's gonna have to give. And some of these need like guided imagery, which isn't gonna be available because the network is down. They're not gonna work. So what I find, I mean, to Colleen's point, is people with our own Trinity Health system are they're really unreasonable. They said, oh, we expect to be fully operational in 72 hours. I said, well, I'm glad you do, but I don't see that happening.
Or a little more.
A little more, yeah. And for Dr. DeChristopher's point, I don't know enough about reimbursement. I think Yolanda's probably really good at that, but I don't know the granular details of physician Part B.
Other questions? No? Oh, they were.
Okay, real quick, if you go to your slide where you have all the departments, either green, yellow, or red.
This one or the other one?
Yes. This is the one that all the departments. Who's up or who's still down.
Oh, you mean the application?
Yeah.
Oh, the application, okay. This one.
How do you keep track of this and how do you share this with other departments?
So our LIS group is gonna work with the command center to keep track of this. How we're gonna share it, we're not sure yet. We did get a separate Zoom account entirely separate from Trinity Health. So assuming we'd have personal devices where these things would exist, we could share it via Zoom as opposed to Teams, which is what we normally do. And then this was meant for the regional lab, but also for the hospital command center. So if you care. So one thing that Trinity Health did was they have a whole separate Microsoft Office license for Cyberattack. So every month I get this siren on my phone that says, woo, Cyberattack drill. So I have to log out of the Trinity Health network, log into this ph.arc system, which is a whole separate Microsoft license, so we can communicate. It's off the network. It's just a regular cloud-based 365 license. So we're hoping we can share information that way, but remains to be seen. We're still doing all of these walkthroughs, and I can share the spreadsheet we have on the website. And we have really a lot of information in there. I just didn't want to put it here. It's too hard to see on a big slide. But we haven't done all the walkthroughs yet. And even if blood bank does the walkthrough, we haven't walked it through with nursing or with pharmacy, which doesn't affect blood bank so much, but for these timed orders we have for, all these different meds, what does that look like? We have to be able to get the results to pharmacy for these patients on the blood thinners and anticoagulants.
One more question and then we have lunch outside and it's nice and warm. Outside these doors, when you could go. Any other question? No? Thank you. So before we say goodbye to Gale, I just wanted to let you know, lunch is right outside these doors. You can form 2 lines to get your lunch. Please make sure you're back on time, 1 o'clock. I know that we get carried with our conversation, which is great. But 1 o'clock for our next.
I think like 12, I think we have a little.
Oh, we do have a working lunch, right?
Yeah,
Or
so the things agenda, I'll just go through briefly here, you can take one at the same time as that, we can go by then. And the only other thing that I had mentioned is that I got cut off earlier, your case package, it's filling out secret evaluation forms, please keep those intact, those two parts. Keep your name on the front page, it's the only way we know how to send the certificates out. But yeah, well, if you're back in here by 12:30 for the business agenda, or certainly by 12:45 for the chain meeting, that'd be great.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you.
Up here and. And